All right, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I want to welcome you back to another edition of your Adrenal Fix Facebook Live edition. Lots going on today that we're going to be talking to you about. We're going to be trying to bring a lot of concepts together into one main idea, and that idea has to do with balancing your glucose, stabilizing your insulin levels, settling down inflammation, healing your cell membranes, repairing your mitochondria, and ultimately recovering from your adrenal fatigue nightmare. And that means having energy to go through the whole day with a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, not being anxious, not bonking, being able to handle your stressors, being able to adapt to your climate, being able to be warm when it's cold out, being able to be cold when it's hot out, being able to increase your blood pressure when you stand up or increase your heart rate when a stressor comes. All of these things, being able to stabilize your sleep throughout the entire night so you don't wake up through the entire night over and over again, or being able to fall asleep in an appropriate time, being able to have libido and hormone balance and weight loss and great hair. I mean, how many of you with a show of hearts and likes want that kind of thing? How many? I mean, all of you want that kind of stuff. So I know you guys are asking questions, but my phone's a little bit further away. I'm getting super technical here, getting really cool about it, but I'm not going to be able to answer your questions till the end. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to go over some of the things that I've been talking a lot about lately, and that is, even though you think you don't have a glucose problem, my guess is that if you're watching this, you do. And whether you think it's too low or you know it's high, it's not stable. It's not having the messages to the cell membranes that we need to have. And I've talked about this before, where adrenal fatigue is just the border patrol. Adrenal fatigue is where you have the Coast Guard that patrols the land, and any boats that are coming up on the shore, the adrenals will sound the systems and sort of take care of the first line of defense. And then you'll ask me, okay, well, what's the best supplements for the adrenals? And I'm saying the Coast Guard's already been breached. They're in the castle, they're in the mitochondria, and they're taking the goodies, and they're taking the princess, and you need to worry about that, not so much the Coast Guard. Hopefully that makes sense. But what I wanted to tell you first and foremost, and we've talked a lot about this, is having a good cell membrane. And when we go over methylation and MTHFR and folic acid and eating your green leafy vegetables and being able to secrete enough stomach acid so that you break down your proteins and you absorb iron and you absorb B12 and you're able to assimilate that and you're able to repair your cell membranes, then you're able to get a good transfer of oxygen. And that's what we're really going to be talking about, really, is when we're inflamed, we have a decreased amount of oxygen. And that's why we have thyroid issues, because thyroid regulates your oxygen utilization inside the cell. And this sucks because when I get a message, I have to flip it up to get it out of the way so I can see you. So anyways, let's go into cell membranes and talk about how important they are. Great book. I want you guys to look at it. It's called The PEO Solution. And really those stand for Parent Essential Oils. And I'm guilty of this in terms of, hey, get on your EPA and your DHA and your fish oils. And those are erroneously called essential oils. And in a sense they are, but they're derivatives of the parent 6 and the parent 3. The alpha linoleic acid and the linoleic acid, those are the ones that you want to get. And fish oils don't make up the cell membranes. It's actually omega-6, and we're talking about unadulterated, unheated, unscented, untreated, pure, environmentally grown, not synthesized through a lab, not put with chemicals and hormones and pesticides and crappy minerals, but really good stuff. And when you don't have a good cell membrane and you don't have good cellular methylation and you have a lot of toxic exposures, as a result, your cell membranes begin to oxidize. So why am I talking about that when we're talking about glucose and insulin? Well, you may not have an insulin problem per se, but you have a cell membrane problem, and it's not getting inside the cell. If it's not getting inside the cell, it's like a chimney that has a blocked ventilation system, and all the smoke is not able to get out, and that's going to cause the coming down of the smoke, and it's going to start to get really coffee inside of that house, and in your cells it's going to do the same thing. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. So anyways, let's talk about, did you hear my voice? It kind of sounded like Peter Brady. It sounded like I'm going through puberty there. Anyways, let's talk about insulin. So a lot of the things that people don't understand about insulin is it helps do two major things. It helps accelerate glucose out of the blood supply. And we all know that. We all know, hey, when I have I eat a meal, it causes an insulin spike, my glucose levels go up, and insulin helps flush and usher out that glucose from the blood cell, and it helps to bind to these cell membranes that are hopefully not oxidized, which we've just talked about, to allow, hey, it's glucose and it needs to allow sugar into the cell, and the cell membrane sort of part the C's and glucose goes in there, and now we can produce ATP. So that makes sense. But here's the thing, you don't need to have insulin to do that. You don't. It accelerates it. But we have these things called glut receptors. And these glut receptors will just listen to the message of glucose. And when you pound insulin, eating, carbs, toxic exposures, terrible oils, all of a sudden those glut receptors start to down-regulate. And now you do need insulin. So when you exercise, you help those glut receptors. When you fast, you help those glut receptors. So there's a lot of things that insulin doesn't need to be there for. And insulin is helpful, but in life, and here's a sort of a take home. Life is a bell-shaped curve. You want to be living in the bell-shaped curve. You want to not be doing too much of something or too little of something. And unfortunately or fortunately, our life is a merry-go-round. So if I'm more stressed and I'm doing too little of something, it's going to be even too more little of something, if that makes sense. And if I'm not stressed and I'm doing too much of something, I'm going to be doing even more of too much of something. So you have to be living in that bell-shaped curve, and you have to understand your body, and you have to understand the demands, the stressors, the inflammatory markers, your activity levels, what you're eating, what you're not eating. Lots of going on behind the scenes that's not just responsible for the adrenals to fix. That's the castle. That's the mitochondria. It's not the Coast Guard. So anyway, so what we're talking about is insulin. We said insulin does two main things. It helps get accelerate. It helps accelerate glucose out of the blood supply and into the cell so that you can make ATP for energy. And energy for what? Energy for making cells. Energies for making red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets. So any of us have low red blood cells, low white blood cells, low platelets. Potentially you're not making ATP at the level that you need to be making it. Potentially you're not getting glucose in the cell. And then you're not maybe getting fat into the cell. So there's so many things that we can be talking about, and it's hard for me to organize, and as you can tell, I'm really excited. So what's the second thing that insulin does? Insulin, what it does is it blocks the ability to get into your stored fat, and it blocks the ability to get into protein. And it says, here, just use the glycogen that's in the liver, and we'll pour that into the blood supply so that you don't take all this other stuff. This is for a rainy day. This is for if we are creatures of a millennia of where we've been engineered to go through feast and famine and go through times of harvest and times of not harvest and planting and reaping and sowing. You are engineered for insulin to protect that for a rainy day, and don't tap into this supply. We need it. So on the one hand, insulin helps usher glucose into the blood, into the cells, and accelerate it, although it's going to happen even if we don't have that. And on the other hand, it's going to block the action of getting into the stored fat and getting into the stored protein and utilizing the glycogen stores that are in the liver. Now, if you're eating a lot of carbs, you're eating a lot of proteins, you're exceeding your protein threshold, then your glycogen stores are always going to be overflowing, and insulin is going to be making sure that you use that. And if you take your glucose levels, and by the way, good shout out to my buddy. He doesn't know he's my buddy yet, but he is my buddy. His name is Dorian, and Dorian is the CEO of Keto Mojo. And you know, it was funny, I was talking to him. Keto Mojo is a new, hopefully that's you listening, but Keto Mojo is is sort of the competitor, I wish I would have invented this, to the Precision Extra. And I called Abbott Labs and said, hey, I'm a functional doctor. I want to use, well, what's your prescription number? And what insurance are you using? I was like, no, you don't get it. I want to just do it through pay for. Oh, no, we don't. It's like you're solving and cracking the quartz and you're trying to crack the atom. Like, oh, how do we do this? We got insurance. We don't get to bill thousands of dollars. You're just going to pay cash? I mean, anyways, I digress. But it was like searching through the dark alleys. And it was like, okay, hey, are you trading you got some keto strips? Where should I meet you? Should I meet you at the corner? I mean, that's what it was really like. So anyways, he's come and he's produced this thing called the Keto Mojo, and it's a cool name. And I will be doing an interview with him and explaining to you why you need to do this, because a lot of you guys that think you have low blood sugar don't have low blood sugar. And you're like dumbfounded, like, oh my goodness, I'm looking at my glucose levels and it's 112, and I'm starving. I'm like a bear with a sore tooth. If I don't get any glucose, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna pass out and I'm gonna die of hypoglycemia. I know that. I know you guys. I know you guys better than you know you guys. And if you can, give me a couple of thumbs up and likes and stuff for that, because I know that's what's going on. So what I want you to do when you take your glucose levels is I want you to calibrate what's going on in your blood with what's going on in your brain. Does that make sense? Meaning, if you think you're at 62 and you're at 99, there is a disconnect there. There is like a disconnect between what your sensors are telling you in your brain and what your glucose is actually doing. So back to this story. So when you take your glucose, your fasting glucose, and it's above 100, then you have a hyperglycemic issue. And if you have a hyperglycemic issue, what's going on with insulin? Insulin is pouring out that glycogen, and it's blocking the stored fat and the protein, and it's helping getting glucose out of the cell, and it's constantly high. And if it's constantly high, that's an inflammatory thing. Inflammation, insulin resistance, cell membrane oxidation, brain fog, crashing after a meal, needing sweets after a meal, always needing sweets because you just don't have that sweet appetite doing well, having to pee a lot, having thirst. How many of you have that out there? I know a lot of you have that out there. That's what's going on. And here's the scary thing. A study of 16,000 people over 20 plus years, and they found out that 93% of them were insulin resistant. But the crazy thing of that was with normal fasting glucose levels. Let that sink in. With normal fasting glucose levels. How many of you said, yeah, your blood tests are normal, so you don't have to worry. You have no glucose problem. But doctor, I get tired, I get shaky, I get lightheaded. If I have a meal, I crash, I crave sweet. Don't worry. You don't have any problems. Your glucose is fine. Go ahead. You're not gluten sensitive. Eat all the gluten you want. There's nothing wrong with you. And come back and see me when the antidepressants and the anti-anxiety medications don't work, and we'll do some kind of additional medications. I'm sorry, but that's how it works. So then 80% of those people that are insulin resistant have a normal glucose tolerance test. So what does that say about your body? It says that your body is really efficient at keeping within the lab ranges that we have so broad that we're not being detected as a problem. We need to change our detection monitoring, and we need to change the way that we look at this. This is going to cripple the healthcare costs. I mean, unfortunately, the U.S. is the barometer of healthcare, and it's not doing a good job. And the rest of the world sort of follows suit with, I'm from Canada, and we used to think that a lot of the Americans were overweight and obese. You know what, Canada? You guys are overweight and obese too now. Sorry to say it. Like I grew up, I'm actually, I'll tell you this, I'm 48 years old. I just had my birthday, and I'm 6. There was Terry Fox, and he was the guy who had cancer, and he had one leg, and he did the Terry Fox across the country. And if you go and look at old videos, skinny, the whole society was different. And there's a lot more toxins, and there's a lot more problems, and now everyone's overweight. And the problem is your glucose levels are normal, your glucose tolerance tests are normal, and you don't have a glucose problem. You do have a glucose problem, and you need to fix it yesterday. And you need to do something about it yesterday. So anyways, where was I? So let's talk about the 2 functions that insulin does. It helps accelerate glucose out of the blood supply, and it helps not allow you to tap into your stored fat and your stored protein levels. And you can't use the glucose from the muscles because that doesn't have a proper enzyme to help get it into the blood supply. It's used for short bursts, and evolution has sort of taken care of that and allowed us to survive, because if we need a quick little burst of energy to defend our lives, we need that glucose readily available. And how do I know this? Well, I'm such a nerd that I actually have an exercise physiology degree as well, so I know that. So anyways, with insulin resistance, your glycogen stores are maxed out. You're eating, you feel like, hey, I got hypoglycemia, I gotta have small meals more frequently, because if I don't, oh my gosh, my blood supply, my glucose is gonna fall so low, and I'm gonna die of hypoglycemia. You're not gonna die. And that's one of those things I wanted to tell you is, the body is not engineered to die of hypoglycemia. It's just not. If you think about it, when our blood glucose levels are, we haven't eaten for a while, do you become more alert or less alert? You become more alert. This is a evolutionary trait that's been passed down in terms of, hey, if you haven't eaten for a while and you're in the middle of the food chain and you need to sustain your existence, you better be with it and you better be sharp on the ball. We're not engineered to die of hypoglycemia. If in fact you were to continue to, all things being equal, and drink water during your fast, you're not going to die of hypoglycemia. You would die if you didn't have proteins. You would die of eventually of asphyxiation, or you wouldn't be able to get enough oxygen from your lung expression, and that would take a real long time. It wouldn't take 24 hours from the meal that you took last night and the next meal you'll take in 24 hours. Now, with that being said, we're going to talk about how to go about doing this. I wouldn't say, okay, hey Joel, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm going to stop eating and I'm going to fast tomorrow. Don't do that, because you're not fat adapted yet. You're not good at getting fat into the mitochondria. You may have some genetic predispositions. You may not be really good at beta oxidation. You may not be making L-carnitine and CoQ10, and you need to see someone that's going to test you for that. And that's what I do. You're not just going to say, okay, let's get you on metformin and let's get you eating keto and take some exogenous ketones and you're there. It doesn't work that way. It takes a little bit more sophistication. Sorry, I got to get rid of that. Anyways, if anyone can write in there and say, hey, you need to just put a blocker on there so you don't keep getting these messages. Anyway, so your glycogen stores fill up, and insulin ensures that it gets pushed into the blood supply, and then insulin helps get it out of the blood supply, and then you take your fasting glucose, and it's always 99, 103, 112, but guess what? You're not diabetic. Speaking of which, these lab ranges, they're so freaking broad. Like I've had a lab test where I had someone who took a lab range, and I think the lab ranges was 60 to 126. I'm not kidding, of glucose, 60 to 126. So that means wherever they did that lab, it was probably out of state. And they do an average of the population, and they look at the average of the high and the average of the low, and they drop it one standard deviation above, on either side, and they came up with 126. And so, you're negative at 125, yet you need to have 120. Actually, it was 134. It was 134 on the high end. So if you were 132, you were told you were normal. It wasn't flagged. But newsflash, if you're above 126, you're diabetic. So what is that lab telling you? It's telling you that you're normal to be diabetic now. Is there something wrong with that, or am I the only person that sees that there's something wrong with that? Give me a couple likes and thumbs up for that. That's why they call me the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja. So anyways, fatty liver. That's where you get these fatty livers, because guess what? Your glycogen stores are high, it's overflowing, and you're exceeding the rate at which you can do anything about it. And it starts to deposit on the liver, and then you start to see your cholesterol levels go up, your triglyceride levels go up. If any of you have high triglycerides and it's higher than your cholesterol, you're insulin resistant, no matter what doctor has told you you're not. Triglycerides higher than your cholesterol, you're insulin resistant. Fatty liver, so fatty liver from modified corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup. You can't, like a Diet Coke or a root beer or whatever the sodas, you're going to exceed the rate at which these enterocytes in your gut lining can do anything with it. It's going to go right through the portal circulation, deposit on your liver, and now you have fatty liver. You have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and that's a huge problem. Go Google it and see if there is an epidemic of that. There is. So anyways, and then you're going to have oxidative stress. And that comes down to a lot of the things we talked about with proper oils and making sure that those good cell membranes are bringing in oxygen, and that chimney is open, and you're able to get toxins out, and you're able to get air in, and a good exchange. Hopefully that makes sense to you too. On the flip side, we have the diabetic concerns, and that's where you have a taxed pancreas. Pancreas is tired, man. You got to make some more insulin again. So eventually what happens? Insulin stops produced. It stops being produced. So now you no longer have the brakes. You no longer have the brakes. So what do you start to see? Your body needs to balance that glucose levels. And because insulin isn't just pushing glucose out of the blood supply, it's pouring all of that glucose into the blood supply. And not only do you have glycogen stores that can't keep up, insulin is no longer putting the brakes on the protein, and you get a lot of people that have type 2 diabetes. They have these big abdomens, and they got these little twigs in terms of limbs and legs. I mean, how many of you have seen people like that? That's because there's no more insulin guarding that, and they're metabolizing their protein. Needs to stop. They need to start to do some things like cycling their diet and start fasting. Oh, but wait, they'll die if they don't have any foods. Twigs. It is twigs. I know. Took me forever. There's a little delay on there. It was like Twix, and then figured it out, twigs. They're also going to have fatty pancreas. They're not going to secrete a lot of digestive enzymes. So now all of a sudden, all these excess carbs that they're eating are not being broken down. And that's creating a lot of fermentation. So what are we going to do? Oh, I got a good idea. Let's give you an antacid. And let's decrease even further your ability to make hydrochloric acid. And now you're going to become iron deficient, and you're going to become B12 deficient, and you're further not going to produce enough red blood cells, and you're further not going to get enough oxygen into the cell. And then guess what happens? your oxygen to the cell doesn't respirate properly, and now all of a sudden we have all these problems like mitochondrial dysfunction, increased cancers, not being able to turn off the expression of an Epstein-Barr virus, not being able to detoxify, not being able to get rid of a heavy metal. All of these things, and you're wondering, hey, I'm MTHFR, what do I do about it? Or I got heavy metal toxicity, I got mercury, should I do ALA or not? Well, let me ask you, how's your glucose? And what are you doing about it? And, well, no, I'm hypoglycemic. Really? When was the last time you took your glucose levels? Oh, when I go to the blood test, it's normal. Oh, and that really means then it's fine? Or you get shaky, lightheaded, and jittery if you haven't had a meal? Or you crash after a meal? Or you crave sweets after a meal? Or you're peeing a lot? You're thirsty? Look at the signs. It's an epidemic. Anyways, I'm on a roll, right? What else did I want to talk to you about? And then lastly, diabetes has oxidative stress. And so, question, how do I fix this? Well, if you look to our ancestors again, and you say, well, what did they do? Well, they had periods of feast and famine. And so they had rotational diets. If they had more of a crop, or if they had more of the availability of a certain herd, they ate and they gorged and they feasted. And then they feasted, a word, is that plural, feast? But on the other hand, if there wasn't there, they would be able to fast, and that was really good for the body, and so that's what we need to do, and you really need to look at that. So it's called diet variation, it's called intermittent fasting, it's called feasting actually, and reloading, and it's even called full fasting. And what is the secret formula, Joel? I don't know. We need to figure it out with you. We need to figure out, where are you in this? Is there a lot of mineral deficiencies? Is there a sinkhole of B12 and methylation and SAMe problems because you've been blocked up for so long? Do you have hydrochloric acid? Do you have any type of microbial growth? I'm guessing you do. You probably have a whole lot of candida. You probably have bacterial overgrowth because you aren't making digestive enzymes and or hydrochloric acid any longer. You're probably iron deficient. You're probably not making B12. But you know what? Your glucose levels are normal and you're nothing wrong with you. So what do we do about this? What are some of the things that we can do about this? High-fat diets are good, and what I want people to do is learn about their BMR, which is their basic basal metabolic rate, meaning how much calories do you need to sustain your weight? Oh, but that will mean I gotta track my calories, and that's such a pain in the butt. You know what's a pain in the butt? Having to be on insulin. And you know what's a pain in the butt? Spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on medication. And even more of a pain in the butt is having limbs that you got to cut off and not being able to see out of your little vessels in your eye. That's more of a pain in the butt. You got to figure out, do I not want to do my glucose levels? And, oh, it's a pain to prick my finger. It's a pain to cut your finger off. I mean, which one's more of a pain? And if you don't think that's a problem and you don't think that's going to happen, talk to the peripheral neuropathy patients that I see that can't feel their toes or can't, are dropping things because they're trying to cook and they can't feel their hands. That's a problem. So anyways, moderate proteins. So when we figure out your basal metabolic rate, that's the amount of calories that you need to maintain your weight if you didn't exercise. And then you can factor exercise in there. So if I'm highly active, if I'm moderately active, if I'm minimally active, you're going to times it by a factor of say 1.2, 1.6, 1.8, depending. So you figure out based on your height, based on your weight, based on your age. In my case, I think I need to be somewhere in the 1,600 calories. And if I'm moderately active, I times that by about 1.4. Now I got to be somewhere in the 2,600 calories to maintain my weight. Now, how much protein do I need? Well, let's say I'm 12% body fat. Actually, let's just make it easy. I'm not 10%, although I'm look buff, but I'm really not 10%. Let's say I weigh 170 and I'm 10% body fat. I will be one day, but not yet. So that would mean I have 17 pounds of fat, and it means I have 143 pounds I said 170, 153 pounds of lean weight. So what I would do is I would times 153 by 0.7. So any mathematicians out there, that's about half of the, wait, 3/4 of one. Let's just say 100 or 108, somewhere in that area. So I need to eat 108 grams of protein per day, or 0.7 grams per lean pound of body weight. So let's figure it out again. The 200-pound person who's 10% body fat, they have 190 pounds of lean weight. You times that by 0.7 and you figure out that's how much protein you're going to be getting. And my guess is you're way above that. And so if you're way above that, you're going to increase your glucose stores, your glycogen stores, and this whole cascade is going to ensue. And that could be because you're taking too much protein. It happens, and I know you guys, I know who you are, you have too much protein. So you got to have moderate protein. You got to lower that protein. Now here's the good thing about protein is you can do that over the average over a month. So let's say I'm 100 grams of protein per day, and one day I go crazy, I have a buffalo and I'm at 200. Or another day I got to go down to 0. Or how many of you have ever done that? That's diet variation. How many of you have ever not had protein, like less than 5 grams for a day? You wouldn't die of that either, I guarantee you. But you can average that out. So if I go 120, 80. If I go 130, I'll go 90. I go or 70. Those are the things that you need to do. What do you eat for protein? So, I mean, you can do grass-fed beefs, you can do eggs, you can do, I'm not a crazy fan of chicken. I don't really like, it's kind of nasty to me. But you do all the things that are animals if you like to eat animals. But make sure that they're organic, make sure they're grass-fed, make sure they're hormone-free, free range, make sure they had a good psychologist so that they have a good disposition, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, low carbs. So low carbs, what does that mean? You know what? It depends. I don't want you to get into this dietary rotation, intermittent fasting, if you're already at 300 grams of carbs per day. And here's the scary thing. A lot of you guys don't know how much grams of fat you're doing a day. Oh, but it's a pain in the ass. Knock that off. You got to learn, because if you don't know, you can't track it. And if you can't track it, you can't manage it. I mean, seriously. Anyways, but what I would tell someone is if you're at 300, that needs to stop. Go down to 250, go down to 200. If you're at 200, go down to 150. If you're at 150, go down to 100. If you're at 100, let's get you down to 50. And that's what you really need to do. So we're 0.7 grams of protein per lean weight of body, which is your lean weight percentage times 0.7. And then you go to about 50 grams of carbs. You don't start there. You get an idea on where you're at, and then you figure that out. Now, in my case, let's say I needed to be at 2,600, and I'm at 100 grams of protein. So that's 400 calories, because every gram of protein is 4 calories. So that's 400. And let's say I want to keep it at 50 grams of carbs. So that's 200. Every gram of carb is 4 calories. So now I was at 400 with the 100 of calories, and I was at 200 with the carbs. So that's 600. So now I got to eat a remaining 2,000 calories. And I would divide 2,000 by 9 to get how many grams of fat I would need. And that would be, say, somewhere in the 150, 160 area. But here's where you lose weight. Now let's say I want to lose weight. I'm going to take it off that 150 or so grams of carbs. So let's say I want to lose a pound a week. That's 3,500 calorie deficit a week. That is 500 calories deficit a day. And if I divide that by 9, what am I at? I'm at 60, 50, maybe 50, somewhere 55 grams of fat. So instead of being at the 158, I go down to 100. Watch this over again. You'll need to. And hopefully my math is kind of right. And then no processed carbs, no crappy oils. And then we're talking about, once you get control of your carbs, go down to 3 feedings. And when I say feedings, that doesn't mean I had a protein bar and in between lunch, and then I had a couple of pieces of fruit, I had a little bit of yogurt, I had a replacement shake, then I had my lunch, and then I had, you know, another protein bar. And no, we're talking about 3 times that you ate. Because every time you ate, you caused that insulin surge. And that insulin surge caused this whole craziness that we're talking about. And why is it good to fast? I wanted to just go over that. 7 reasons. One of the things that it does is it causes autophagy or autophagy, depending on tomato or tomato. I think Canadians would call it autophagy. I'm not sure which one they would call it. But either way, the good thing about intermittent fasting and full fasting is it kind of helps recalibrate your mitochondria and get rid of the sick herd and improve the strong herd. And that's what it does. And when it does that, it can produce new stem cells. So it can go and repair the pancreas, or it can go and repair your sore knee, or it can help regenerate white blood cells. And it's going to help make stem cells, and they'll decide where they want to go. It also increases your longevity genes. It helps repair your DNA and decreases inflammation. It also helps to control your glucose surges, and it helps you lose weight. I mean, it really gives you a lot of brain clarity. It helps. It's a cleaner burning fuel. Ketones are a cleaner burning fuel. The example I use on ketones is it's kind of like me going to a place where the cost of living is really, really cheap, and I make double the money. I have to pay less to live there, and I get way more dollar for my value, or way more value for my dollar. And it helps reset the microbiome. I mean, who of us want that? And then it also helps optimize your hormones, meaning you don't have to be on hormone replacements. Your body knows what to do. So anyways, hopefully I brought it for you guys today. You got a lot out of that. What I'll do is I'll go through your questions and see what you have asked me here. All right. Hi, Michelle. Kathy Wise, give you a big hands up to you as well. Actually, a fist bump for you. Brenda, hi, how you doing? All these highs. When you guys say hi, I say hi right back to you, but I can't answer a lot of those when I'm doing it. Joanne, big high five. I'm glad you're enjoying this, Colleen. I'm looking forward to seeing you. PJ, it's great information. It is great information, but that's just me. Michelle, that's you. Twig, Anna, we talked about that. Sticks, haha. Sandy, no questions. We talked about my protein. Organic chicken, I do like organic chicken, but it's weird. Like I think that I could become sort of semi-vegetarian a little bit. What are the formulas? We talked about that. So you would go to, it's BMI/calculator.net. And you don't really want your BMI, you want your BMR. So you would go to BMI/calculator.net and then look under BMR, and then it's got this fancy formula. You need your age, you need your height, you need your weight, you need your sex, all those things you could probably get. And then you're going to factor for your exercise levels, and then you're going to figure that out. I can't do everything for you. Sue, what are the formulas? Oh, we just talked about that, Brenda. Hi there. Ninja, Andy, yes, love your teaching. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Colleen, I think we said hi twice. Brenda, thank you so much. You're so welcome. And then Melissa, how do we start? I'm used to eating small meals throughout the day. Start glucose finger? No, I wouldn't start with that. I would start with not eating small meals throughout the day. We just talked about that. Let me see what else you asked. How low should glucose be before eating? I don't want you to even think about that. I just want you to know you're not going to die if glucose goes too low. That's what I would say, number 1. Number 2, I would say if you're used to eating small meals frequently through the day, stop that. And have, let's say you had small meals frequently through the day and you put it all on the table and that's all what you had. Then I would divide that into 3 portions. I divide it to breakfast, lunch, and dinner and not eat anything else in between. Then I would start to push that breakfast a little later and I would push that dinner a little bit earlier. Then what I would do is I would say, okay, how am I doing with my glucose levels? I'm going to measure it in the morning, and I'm going to measure it between when I have my first meal. And if I see that my glucose when I first measured it and when I took it after went down, I'm doing the right thing. If I felt that it went up, maybe I'm waiting too long. And there's a lot more to that story, and you're just going to have to work with me in that case. You're very welcome. I hope that's helpful. So that's it. That's all I got for you. Usually these Facebook Lives shouldn't be as long as I'm doing it, but because I care so much about you guys getting this information, and you know what? I learned a lot. Actually, stay with me right there. 1 second. This is why I do this. And this is from Marianne Williamson. So our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond our I think it's beyond our measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others. That's why I do this, because I'm an introvert. You guys think that I'm an outrovert. I'm one of those guys that I joke around when I go to my daughter's soccer games where I don't talk to anyone. And I don't, because I talk all day long. And then the last thing I want to do is go out and talk to people. And not that I don't want to, I'm shy, really a shy guy. And I'm all talked out. And it's funny, some of them will come to the office and they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you knew how to talk. And it's like, you know what, I know how to talk, but I save it. And I think, anyways, that was my message. And who are you to, if you have a truth on your heart and you don't let other people know about it, then you're doing a disservice and you're lacking integrity. And I certainly don't want to be doing that. So hopefully you get a lot out of these things. I do care about you guys getting better. This is my way of knowing that not everyone can do my program, but I do want you to get a lot of value out of this. If you are looking to end your adrenal fatigue nightmare, which is more of a mitochondrial fatigue, it's not just the Coast Guard, it's the castle, and the doctors think you're crazy. They think that your blood tests are normal. There's nothing wrong with your glucose. And you know that the hormone replacements aren't fixing it. You know that you shouldn't have gotten your gallbladder out. You know you have a lot of brain fog and taking medications isn't fixing it. Then sign up for a free 45-minute discovery call and we'll figure out what's not working, why you're not getting there, and whether or not I can help you. So anyways, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I look forward to ending your adrenal fatigue nightmare. Have a great night.